Hi, everyone. This is Caroline from Fiat Integrative Health in Franklin, Tennessee, and you're listening to the Fiat Health Podcast. We believe that now more than ever, the healthcare industry has become a place of confusion. And over the years, we have been asked countless questions about what true health and integration for the whole person looks like. Join us every other week as we explore topics ranging from primary care and women's health to counseling and spiritual health. We're so glad you're here. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Fiat Health Podcast. This is Caroline Hartley. I am a co-founder and family nurse practitioner here at Fiat. And today I'm joined with Amanda, family nurse practitioner, specifically focuses on women's health here at Fiat. And yeah, just excited to be with you today, Amanda.
That's great to be with you too.
We are going to dive deep today and jump right into a little bit of a sensitive topic. So if you have little ears around, I would say this is not the podcast to have them listening to necessarily. We are going to talk about natural family planning or fertility awareness-based methods. There's a couple different words out there for it. Specifically, what we believe and how we practice here at the clinic, which is a Catholic Christian worldview. I do want to just preface this a little bit, especially for some of our patients, that we do not judge people in how you practice your own, say, sexuality, sexual life. This is what we believe. This is what we practice personally, and we will never contradict this in our own recommendations. But if you come in and say you do something that's completely different than this, none of us will blink an eye, I promise. So I do want to just put that preface out there. I'm really excited about this because this is something that I think is misunderstood by a lot of people. A lot of people don't understand why the Catholic Church teaches that we use NFP, that we don't use contraception. So we're going to dive in. We're going to talk about the history. We're going to go all in. This is probably going to be a 2-part series, maybe, a 6-part series, really, if we want to go all the way. But why don't you kick us off, Amanda, and let's just talk about what the heck is natural family planning?
Absolutely. So natural family planning is, in a nutshell, any mode of avoiding pregnancy or timing conception that a couple can use that relies on female natural biomarkers alone. So a lot of times we can talk about natural family planning as what it isn't as well. And so it is not contraception. And so contraception is any method to block conception at a time when it would otherwise occur. So this consists of a lot of different things, but most notably condoms, diaphragms, IUDs, birth control pills, birth control devices, that sort of thing. And so really when we talk about NFP, there's many different biomarkers that we're looking at because the female body actually gives us very detailed and very accurate insight into what is going on at any time, which from a faith standpoint is just a beautiful picture of how God has created our bodies. And so biomarkers that are used in natural family planning are cervical mucus, which increases in stretchiness, in lubrication, in clarity around the time of ovulation. You've got your temperature, which in women rises subtly after ovulation. Some methods use cervical position, and then otherwise hormone tracking, where estrogen is your dominant hormone in the first half of the cycle. There's an LH rise right around the time of ovulation, and then you have progesterone as your dominant hormone in the second half. And so if you can use a monitor or strips to test those things, you can very accurately understand what's going on in your body.
Yeah. So natural family planning essentially then is how do we either avoid pregnancy or get pregnancy naturally? It's coming, the word natural. And I think one method I hear often that is considered contraception actually would be the pull-out method, even though that is quote unquote natural. You're not using chemicals or a barrier. Technically that is also considered contraception because we are trying to work with God in his plan. And so avoiding a fertile window, let's say, would be more so than directly trying to interrupt that union, right? Sorry, that was I'm jumping in.
Absolutely. So the idea being that one of the tenets of uses for natural family planning is marital bonding, and that you don't want to disrupt anything, whether that's emotionally or physically, that draws the couple together.
Yeah. Okay, great. So tell us a little bit about like the background of natural family planning. Like, when did it come about? Because obviously these biomarkers, cervical mucus, temperature, all of that are things that haven't been known forever and ever. And are relatively new, really. Yeah,
really. The history of it comes about in the last 100 years, which is just fascinating. Wow. How far we have come in 100 years. Contraception has really always been a thing. Even in ancient Egypt, they figured out ways to prevent pregnancy. Now, was it very successful? No.
But they tried.
They tried. And so when it comes to Christian perspective, from the very beginning of Christianity, all Christians have essentially been united on contraception, that it's not something we do. A tenet of Christianity has always been, what I do with my body matters. And something my friend Caitlin Estes likes to say is there's a deep connection between fertility and faith, which I think is just beautiful. So up until 1930, all Christians were united on contraception, that we didn't do it. Some very strong language, even from people in the Protestant tradition, like John Calvin, on contraception. However, the world was changing in 1930. Interestingly enough, about this time is when natural family planning biomarkers were starting to be understood as well. There's a man named Ogino who developed the first calendar method. That was around like the 1923 time. And so the science behind natural family planning was happening at the same time the world was changing and starting to look at contraception. So in 1930, there was a decision regarding contraception within Christianity that completely redefined how the Protestant versus Catholic world look at it. And that was a meeting of Anglican bishops. It's called the Lambeth Conference. And really, this was in the context of new statistics that probably we could have never understood before this time about world population. Up until this time, we didn't really know who was living on the other side of the planet or how many people. But at this time, they were really looking at world population and concerns for if family size was going to be a problem in terms of world population. And so what the Anglican bishops did at this conference, and feel free to go read up on this otherwise, there's some great documents on it, but they basically just opened the door for pregnancy prevention. They didn't say you have to do it. They didn't say do it. In fact, they said be careful, be cognizant of what you're doing. But they opened the door for it, and Protestant world followed suit.
When you say pregnancy prevention, you mean like using contraception, or did they mean like natural family planning too in terms of pregnancy prevention?
They actually meant natural family planning too. In fact, they said abstinence at times of fertility would be the ideal. But then they left the door open for if there was a situation where that was not possible. And so unfortunately, this is what happens, right? Very vague language in the context. They said, be prayerful, keep a sober mind, all of these things. But the door was open. And that's just what happened. So then you start seeing a real surge in the science behind natural family planning. The Catholic Church stood firm that they were not going to accept this. And so rhythm method led to basal body temperature observations, led to symptothermal method. And this was throughout the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s. Okay.
Do you feel like the science coming alongside was a response to this, or was it more, say, coincidental or providential?
I mean, I probably would say that it was probably all of those things, but I don't think it was directly because of this, because the science was already starting before this happened. Sure. But now the world was just changing. The world was becoming more aware of these things. And, once you see these things, you can't unsee it. And it's like, oh my gosh, you can follow these things and actually know what's going on with the body.
Right.
So then you get to the 1950s where there was the advent of birth control. And that was meant for a very small subset of the population. In theory, it became 100 million women worldwide. So, it is what it is. Again, something that was meant to be a small thing that turned into a big thing. the Catholic Church continued to stand against birth control, but there was a lot of pressure to conform, a lot of pressure to accept it. As an aside, there is abortifacient mechanisms to birth control. And so that was one of the reasons why the Catholic Church was standing against it, in addition to just the idea that it sort of turns on its head the marital bonding piece, the procreative piece of intercourse. So anyways, you get to 1968, where St. Paul VI gives his encyclical called Humanae Vitae, which condemned the use of hormonal contraception, other forms of birth control, sterilization, abortion, and promoted this use of natural birth regulation. This was groundbreaking because there was a papal commission that was put together, and the majority of the commission actually wanted to vote in favor of the artificial contraception, but Humanae Vitae stood against it. So very, very historic thing that happened. And so the Catholic Church continued in their strong stance that this is not how God intended it and how we want things to be.
Yeah. And I think too, like with Humanae Vitae and the Catholic Church's teachings that still to this day are the same, it wasn't like, hey, I know we're saying you can't use birth control, but look, like use an FP as like a substitute for birth control, right? Like that's not really actually what it is.
No.
More in the full picture. And like really anyone who wants to deep dive into this, totally go read Humanae Vitae. It's a great document.
Oh, amazing.
It's available publicly, like on the Vatican website. But it is, like you're saying, like it's more about the marital bonding. And so even today, the church teaches that, you shouldn't be using NFP as contraception, and that you need to have a really serious reason to be using, natural family planning to abstain from having a child. It can't just be like, well, I don't really feel like having a child right now, or like we really want to go to Disney, or, like these superfluous reasons to say, like, I know better than you, God, in terms of the planning of our family. It's more, let's work together and discern this. And like, but there does need to be real reason to use NFP to abstain. So sorry, just a little side note.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Kind of that prayerful consideration and not just using it flippantly for your own desires.
Right.
So historically, then you have Theology of the Body, which is one of my favorite documents ever, which is the study of God in the body that St. John Paul the Great did in the late 1970s, early 1980s. It was 129 reflections on the human person, sexuality, love. It's an amazing document, and it sort of solidified the church's position, but also was a nice add-on to Humanae Vitae, just to say, what's the context of this theology that now has bled into everything we do, including how we plan our families. It's an amazing document. Christopher West and Father Mike Schmitz do a much better job than me on explaining it. So if you have any interest in it, I encourage looking at those two men. But that's kind of the context for how the Catholic Church stood against contraception and why we are doing the things that we're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. And two, John Paul II wrote a really incredible book as well called Love and Responsibility, that a little more philosophical, but also incredible. And I will say too, just talking about like contraception and like the birth of contraception, how, especially in the more like conservative landscape, and just historically, it was really fed to the masses as like a liberation, And I guess I'd love to hear more so like, how has your experience, maybe personally or with other patients, been with people who feel like, I know I've encountered this, like, I feel like I was lied to, that
100%.
This was supposed to be this freedom, and that's how it's sold to me. And in the end, it's not. Maybe you could speak to that a little bit.
Absolutely. So my story with this is that I kind of stumbled my way into natural family planning, having no context for it as a teenager or as a early nurse. And when I got married, I went to my gynecologist and I said, okay, I'm getting married. We're hoping to wait a year before having a child. What can I do? And she said, well, here's this pill. And guess what? It has folic acid in it, so you'll be all ready for pregnancy. True story. And I was like, okay.
Great.
And so
Thanks, Doc.
my mom, who had a friend who was Catholic and had told her about this, was like, don't take it, don't take it, don't take it. And I was like, oh, come on. I'm a nurse.
Catholic
I can
people.
I can figure this out myself. But I asked my gynecologist, I said, I do not want to do anything that is going to cause an abortion. And I've read that in the physician's desk reference, there is a potentially abortifacient mechanism to this. And she was like, oh, no. And appealed to me. And she actually appealed to me as a Christian. She goes, as a Christian, do you think I would ever prescribe something to you that would cause that? And I was like, I was 24 years old. I was like, probably not.
Yeah, I trust you.
And so I took it for a very brief amount of time until kind of in a great providential turn of events. I was taking an ethics class at St. Louis University with a professor who was very bold. And she was like, here, let's read about the Archdiocese position on this. Let's read these documents. And I read it. And this was about 5 months after I got married. And I came home and I said to my husband, I don't care what we're doing, but we're going to figure something else out. And I quit it cold turkey, like couldn't read those documents and not unsee it. So, yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. And that's hard. I mean, that's a hard decision to make for sure. And maybe one of these days, I know a couple different medical providers who went from prescribing birth control to making a very difficult decision and even having to leave their jobs to not prescribe birth control anymore because it goes so much against the grain of what people are taught in the medical field and what people do and practice and all that. So that's beautiful. So tell us, let's talk a little bit then about like, okay, we've established, we're not going to do birth control. What are the different ways that we can practice natural family planning? And we may just like gloss over these a little bit and have another podcast that goes a little bit more in depth here because there's a lot that goes into all of this. But yeah, we'll at least start the conversation and go from there.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of methods. And so I'm only going to touch on the ones that I feel are most relevant, most effective, but that doesn't mean that I'm even scratching the surface of everything that's out there. When it comes to methods, you want to know your goals. Do you want it to be cheap? Do you want it to be reliable? For what purpose do you want it to be reliable? Do you want it to observe one biomarker or multiple? Do you want to learn with a teacher? Can it be used medically? You got to establish your priorities. Working with an instructor at some point is really important for all of them, truly, to be effective. And so I do think that that is important. But you've got your cervical mucus only methods like Creighton and FEM. You've got your cervical mucus and temp methods, which there's a lot of them, but couple-to-couple league is one. And then some people use an Ara ring, which is a temp monitor as part of that because you have to track your temperatures. One important thing to remember is that technology can fail. So keep that in mind as far as what you rely on. And then, of course, hormone tracking via fertility monitors, which Marquette method. And then these monitors that you can buy on your own, like Mira and Anito, which right now they're saying 97.2% accuracy in avoiding pregnancy with those. Okay. So actually pretty good statistics and really interesting to watch your hormones all day.
Yeah, for sure. So I know for me, when we were getting ready to get married, we were already, I would say, well-formed and knew that we didn't want to use birth control and wanted to do natural family planning. And so I went on like a crusade of learning every method out there.
Good for you. That's amazing.
We were also still in college. And we were like, okay, we got to, need to figure out how to hopefully not get pregnant for like 6 months so I could graduate. But I learned Creighton, which like you said, is totally mucus-based. And FEM didn't exist yet, but learned couple-to-couple league with temperature. I learned all the Marquette, the different monitors and everything. And I think one interesting thing that I really love about learning about your body in this way is that even though we were learning it as like, okay, we want to avoid pregnancy for now, that it's incredibly useful to get pregnant.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Which is, it's like two for one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everything. And then two, I talk a lot to patients, especially teens, as they're like getting ready to go to college and or just like they've established their cycle. It's like, the cycle is their fifth vital sign. It's so important to know what is normal, what is abnormal, even on a very basic level. A high schooler, I don't expect them to be like using an Anito or a Mira,
Right.
Or understanding their cervical mucus even is a little reach for a teenager, outside of the basics. But just to know like, oh, it's not normal for me to bleed for this many days, or I shouldn't be laid up in bed in pain. The signs that something is off because our body is telling us something really important. And you need, even though it's called natural family planning, it's really just cycle education. And you need that to know what's abnormal, even in those, younger years before you're ever thinking about having babies.
Absolutely. Even just to be able to say, hey, I don't feel very good today.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a hormonal reason for this?
Yeah.
And I love when some of my teenage patients are like, well, I feel kind of bad today, but I think that's because my progesterone is probably dropping because I'm on cycle day 27. And I'm like, I love that. That's great.
That's incredible. It's about that time, for my progesterone to drop. So amazing. Okay, great. Well, maybe talk a little bit about where the different methods are best used in terms of like what you're looking for.
Absolutely. So identifying your priorities. You can use natural family planning to achieve pregnancy, to avoid pregnancy, monitor and maintain your gynecologic health, which is huge and something that I think gets overlooked for sure. And then also just marital bonding. A couple can only be fertile when they're together. And NFP leads to this shared responsibility of family planning. It also leads to the full giving of self to your spouse without any barriers, literal or figurative.
Mm-hmm.
And so knowing what your priorities are, if you're achieving pregnancy, all of these methods that I briefly mentioned can be used for that. In the case of infertility, some methods are superior to others depending on the provider you're working with, the issues that you have. Mm-hmm. For avoiding pregnancy, full disclosure, I'm a Creighton model teacher, so I'm going to say that Creighton model has a 99.5% effectiveness in avoiding pregnancy. If there's like a very clear and necessary reason to avoid, it may be one of the best options for that. If avoiding is very, very important. Then you have the monitoring, maintaining of gynecologic health. That, again, really depends on what provider you're seeing, what kind of issues you're having. And then marital bonding, I really think they all can do that because they just leave that relationship open to life without any barrier in the way.
Yeah. And I had a theology professor once, really boldly just say, like, if you're using contraception, you're not fully giving yourself to your spouse, any method, and how that's really a disservice to your marriage. And I guess I'll just speak a little bit to some of the different methods too of like avoiding. In our experience, like some methods are a little bit easier to use than others.
Oh, for sure.
And like, Creighton can be really labor intensive.
For sure.
It is definitely superior, I think, in avoiding and achieving pregnancy.
Yes, definitely. It has the best statistics, if that makes sense.
And a lot of research behind it.
Yeah.
But I know, like, for myself, like, I like having a monitor to back up what I'm seeing in my Creighton observations, my mucus observations, because it tells me, oh yeah, okay, I'm not going crazy. Like this is what I'm seeing.
Absolutely.
Is tracking with the hormones that I also see in this monitor. But then there's times where the monitor is not working.
Right. And it's always the times where you really need it
exactly.
to work.
You're like, what the heck? Maybe you could briefly, just because we have a couple more minutes still, talk about like the basic, for people who are trying to say use this to avoid pregnancy, typically, what are you seeing in terms of abstinence? Like practically, someone who's never ever used this, what does it look like to use NFP to avoid pregnancy?
So typically, there's a learning curve to it. Definitely the first month, you might be avoiding more days than you would expect because you've really got to figure out like, what are my biomarkers? What do I see? So it can be a lot of days. Once you get it kind of under your belt, especially if it's hard to figure out your biomarkers, definitely meet with a teacher because they can help you figure that out.
Right.
But really, fertile days a month, most women have somewhere between about 4 to 6 days of mucus leading up to ovulation. And then all ovulations occur within 72 hours of the last episode of fertile mucus. So you're looking at probably somewhere between like 5 to 9 days a month.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I could say too, just from my own personal experience, like it can be really frustrating because you're seeing, especially in like a mucus only based method like Creighton, where it's like, oh, it says I'm fertile all the time. Like we can never, ever, ever come together and have sex. Like what is going on? And that's totally where a teacher is really helpful. Mm-hmm. And then two, everybody, once you get into this world, if you have friends who also practice NFP, everybody's so different.
Yes.
And so it's like, wait, you peak on this day and you guys only abstain this much, where like, other people are blessed with lots of fertility. And it's like, oh, actually we have to abstain like 10 to 14 days every cycle.
Yeah.
And that's reality. And it's not necessarily easy,
No, definitely not.
It's not like we choose this method because it's the easiest method to do.
For sure. It's not because it's easy at all.
Yeah, but it is, still beautiful in its own way. And I think it really also just, at least speaking personally, encourages people to live out the way it's supposed to be lived out. Like you're not going to do that. You're not going to abstain that much unless you have a real reason to.
That is true.
It's
you really have to think through the reason why you're doing it.
Right.
Absolutely.
It's not, you can't use it flippantly, typically. And so unless you're really, really good at abstaining, but maybe personally we're just not.
Right.
But yeah, I think I want to be really real and set expectations that using NFP is not easy. There's definitely a learning curve, like you said. It could be frustrating at times. It could be definitely can be confusing at times, but that in the end, if you have that reason why, and we'll put up all kinds of resources for everybody in the show notes in terms of like documents as well as providers who teach NFP and all the different methods, then, if you're resolute in why you're practicing natural family planning, then I guess I can't imagine ever using any form of contraception. It would be very difficult after 12 years of using NFP to be like, yeah, actually, we're just going to not be fully together because, the church teaches that it's really out of like selfish reasons. Like we're just here to pleasure each other, not to be united,
Yeah.
Anyways, that's my little soapbox.
I agree. Like once you go to natural family planning, there's a beauty in that openness in your relationship. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to ever imagine doing something else.
Yeah. And, there's a roller coaster of like every month you're like, yeah, we made it. If you're abstaining, you're like, okay, you did get your period, or you don't, and you are pregnant. And it's like, okay, Lord, like, we discerned, we tried our best, and we're still open to life though.
Yeah.
And so if that means that we do get pregnant, there is like this extra layer of like abandonment and trust in the Lord with NFP that you definitely don't, I think you can get, I guess, with contraception because it's not 100% effective. But I think for the most part, you're not like, am I pregnant every month?
Right.
So yeah, just it's a little bit different. Okay. Any last closing thoughts, Amanda?
I mean, I think I'll just close with natural family planning is a beautiful thing that I think really shows the true, the good, and the beautiful. Mm-hmm. And I would encourage anyone who's never considered it to reach out if you're interested. And we can give you resources. We can talk you through the different options, but it really is something that if you haven't tried it, I would strongly encourage it.
Yeah, absolutely. I second that 100%. All right. Well, thank you so much, Amanda, for taking the time to chat with me today about this fun topic. Maybe next time we'll do a deep dive into these different methods and how they work, get a little more sciencey. We'll see. If you guys really enjoyed this episode, or if you have any questions at all, shoot us an email, media@fiathealth.org. or, call the office. We're always happy to chat, give more resources, and thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. To learn more, you can visit our website at fiathealth.org. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. This helps make the podcast easier to find. Lastly, if you'd like to reach out, ask a question, or suggest a topic for a future show, send us an email at media@fiathealth.org. God bless.